The thoughts of men should rise as high as eagles welcome to Browse Held High. The Lone Ranger is out in theaters now.
You've probably seen the trailers in which Johnny Depp deps about with a bird pooping on his face while he, how do I put this?
Talk in this voice? Kimosabi?
Admittedly, I'm judging the film without having seen it yet, and supposedly they're trying to save the troubled history of the Tonto character, and for what it's worth, the Navajo Nation gave its blessing to the production, and Depp was inducted as an honorary member of the Comanche, and in every interview, Depp has said he's dedicated to making Tonto into a stronger figure, but still, it's a Native American character. Shouldn't the guy trying to save the character be, Native American?
It'll come out however it comes out, but for now, all I gotta say is, Johnny Depp should know better.
Released in 1995, Dead Man was a re-revisionist Western film.
Kyle! Wear a hat!
By American indie legend Jim Jarmusch. Coming after a long period of honing his style in slices of Americana, he decided to dip his toes into genre, first with a Western, then with a gangster film, Ghost Dog Way of the Samurai, which, if you'll recall, I rapped about. I apologize.
Now, before we get to the treatment of Native Americans in the film, I want to talk about the movie just as a whole.
Dead Man is the story of Bill Blake, an accountant heading west looking for a job, finding out that there isn't one. After stumbling into bed with a woman, he gets shot, shoots back, and then runs away from marshals, vigilantes, and 3 of the craziest lawmen in the West. He meets a native man named Nobody, who decides to guide him into the spirit world. And so, the rest of the film is Johnny Depp slowly dying.
Yeah!
The film itself feels not unlike any of Jarmusch's previous movies. Low-down, common folk Americana, crisp monochrome, fascination with the pauses between lines, the calm serenity of Yasujiro Ozu, and he added cowboys.
Well, alright, cowboy is a strong term, I suppose.
Johnny Depp's Bill Blake is pretty damn far from a classic Western hero. He doesn't ride into town looking to right wrongs, he does it for a job. Which he does not get.
The only job you're going to get in here is pushing up daisies from a pine box.
He's like the opposite of a great Western hero.
Of course, some perspective. This was made 16 years after John Wayne died, and only 3 years after Clint Eastwood destroyed precisely that kind of hyper-masculine killer that he's played for decades. This isn't a classic Western, with all their morality tales about the nature of justice and the balance between individual liberty and the needs of society. And even before this, the Western had already undergone revision from its roots in John Ford movies.
Film critic Jonathan Rosenbaum called this film the last in a long line of great alternative Westerns, what he called the acid Western.
Although there's no acid in the film. There is peyote, though. Although Jarmusch prefers the term psychedelic Western, which may be more fitting. In Greek, psyche delun means mind-revealing. Dead Man is a meditation on...
I'm just gonna stop myself and say that I normally hate the phrase meditation on. Whenever critics use it, it's just like a poetic way of saying that this movie was slow and boring and it talked about stuff. After Earth is a meditation on nepotism.
But here it's rather appropriate. One of the many uses of meditation is a way of contemplating universal truths, such as one's own mortality. Since the film's about death, meditation is an appropriate phrase. The movie is certainly trance-like. Constant fade-ins and fade-outs give the impression of drowsily wandering through consciousness. The scenery has the lucidity and hyperreality of an Ansel Adams photograph. Even the score was made in a trance. Neil, yes, that Neil Young, wrote a basic theme and then plugged in his guitar and improvised the score while watching the film. Hearing the soundtrack to this film is listening to a musician's real-time reaction to the imagery. It reveals his mind. Psyche delun.
And it's funny as hell. I mean, yeah, I'm making it sound like a particularly obnoxious night in your college friend's dorm room basement as he babbles on about that one time he saw the universe expanding while dropping E and listening to Harvest Moon, but Jim Jarmusch has a sense of humor.
A lot of Jarmusch's previous works have their own sense of absurdity.
I scream, you scream,
And Dead Man is often just as absurd. There's a comedy in Blake's journey. He never at any given point in time has any clue what's happening to him, even as his guide is preparing his funeral barge.
Time for you to leave now, William Blake. Time for you to go back to where you came from.
You mean Cleveland?
I already mentioned Blake's gun control issues. The violence in this movie is consistently awkward, ugly, clumsy, even ridiculous.
Well, quit talking about it and do it, by God. I will. There you go. Good God, I'm hit. Lord have mercy. Burns like hellfire.
And even the enemies they face are pretty funny. There's one scene where they meet Billy Bob Thornton, Iggy Pop in a dress, and, that one guy. The dude who punched Pete Campbell in the face. Yeah, him. Generally, you'd expect them to meet some greasy bandit types just come back from holding up a stagecoach, but you usually wouldn't expect them to wear dresses, or complain about their hair.
See, this old stuff of mine, it's just like old barn hay. There ain't a darn thing you can do with it.
Even the cold-blooded bounty hunters are played for laughs. One has a teddy bear.
And they spend most of their dialogue complaining about how they lost exclusivity rights to killing Johnny Depp. Like, Hollywood screenwriters annoyed that their script got rewritten.
I thought we was hot exclusive. He paid us in gold in advance.
And the leader, the Lance Hendrickson character, easily one of the most terrifying psychopaths on film. Here, have him eating a human hand!
And sure, he's terrifying, but he's terrifying like an aristocrat's joke.
Fucked his parents.
He what?
He fucked his parents.
Over?
The humor is often tonally weird, considering the overall sense of cinematic poetry.
Cinematic poetry is another big blanket term thrown around by critics. It's like meditation on, but again, it's appropriate.
Before studying film at NYU, Jarmusch did his undergrad work studying English and American poetry at Columbia, you see.
There is a reason Johnny Depp's character is named William Blake.
That weapon will replace your tongue. You will learn to speak through it. And your poetry will now be written with blood.
William Blake. Action poet.
You William Blake?
Yes, I am. Do you know my poetry?
I found out thy bed of crimson joy, and this dark secret love does thy life destroy.
Summer born. It's a windless night.
My quote was better.
Of course, he isn't actually that William Blake, being American and born several decades after Blake died in 1827. He's just a schmuck with a dull name who happens to share that dull name with a great poet and mystic.
I mean, no disrespect to Bill Blake, or Bob Burns, John Keats, Bob Frost, and John Donne, but why do so many great poets have such boring-ass names?
Now, Blake's personal universe, with its complex mythology and personal mythopoeia, has absolute diddly squat to do with this movie, but
There is certainly a good amount of, fearful symmetry going on here.
the structure of the film is like a poem, rhyming verses. Blake and nobody cross a path, then the bounty hunters cross that same path. Blake gets shot near the beginning of the film, and gets shot near the end. His entry into a white man's town is shot almost identically to his entry into a native town, and the film starts and ends with Blake being propelled by a vehicle as he fades in and out. In and out. And so the end mirrors the beginning, drifting in and out of consciousness before finally expiring. Or maybe he was dead from the moment he got shot. Or the moment he got shot before then. Or maybe he died while on the train. Note the visual symbolism of fire rising, and then entry into a tunnel, followed by sure signs of damnation. Like this meeting with Crispin Glover.
And just to remind you of when you were in the boat And then later that night you were lying, looking up at the ceiling, and the water in your head was not dissimilar from the landscape. And you think to yourself, why is it that the landscape is moving, but the boat is still?
And the overall effect is not unlike a vision quest, a way for an audience member to visualize death before experiencing it. In fact, the central argument of the film between Blake and Nobody is their relation to death. The white man resists at all points, while the Native American has come to terms with the certainty of his mortality.
Which reminds me, I was going to talk about Native Americans, wasn't I? I got really sidetracked. So, Nobody.
My name is Nobody.
Nobody is one of the most fascinating Native American characters, in American indie film. He is both an homage to and a reappropriation of old stereotypes, displaying both an authentic nativeness with ironic nods to his culture's assimilation and the overculture's ignorance of his character, all the while staying funny, profound, flawed, and most importantly, human. Actor, activist, and blues musician Gary Farmer needs a lot of credit for this. Canadian by nationality, Cayuga by tribe, Wolf by clan, the guy makes this movie.
There was a brief moment in history when we actually tried to cast Native Americans in Native American roles. That somehow stopped. I mean, one of the biggest franchises of the new millennium, and it features a slew of indigenous characters and hinges on the relationship between white and native cultures, and it takes place in the modern day, and for the lead, they get an alpaca-faced white guy with a tan. Well, hey! Another reason to hate Twilight! Oh good, I thought we were all out!
Now, on the surface, Nobody seems like a basic riff on the Tonto stereotype. The helpful native guide who only exists as the white dude's wingman / therapist / bullet magnet. And yes, he's basically Tonto to Johnny Depp's Lone Ranger. He even has his own version of Kemo-Sabe.
Stupid fucking white man.
But he's more complicated than Tonto, with a far more fleshed out character. He has a sense of humor, for one thing. And he has a life outside of his devotion to Whitey, whom he isn't so much devoted to as he is amused by. And he actually speaks his own language. Accurately.
Ik zei het je. Je na muxie na begon. Na oud sapsi na begon. Na ga muxie. A bister document sick.
That may seem like a small thing, but for a language with so few speakers to be preserved in a film like this is no common occurrence. Especially considering that once upon a time, movies did Aboriginal languages like this.
Me break you in half. Dig him a hole. You push him up daisies.
This was a deliberate choice by Jarmusch. He wanted lines of unsubtitled Blackfoot, and in this scene, Cree, specifically as an in-joke for indigenous audiences.
Nitchimos.
Oh, what?
Just squaw. She didn't mean to call you that.
A more elaborate in-joke is a running gag involving tobacco.
Do you have any tobacco?
I don't smoke.
It's asked of Blake by both white and native. A lot.
Are you sure you have no tobacco?
Have you got any tobacco?
Do you have any tobacco? Do you have tobacco?
We sure don't.
Sorry, I don't smoke.
No, I've already told you I don't smoke. If I don't smoke, there's a pretty good chance that I don't have any tobacco.
The joke is meant to underline the difference between white American and Native American cultures. For whites, tobacco is, of course, a vice. It's indulgent and cancerous and makes people glare at you every time you step outside for a fix.
Got any extra tobacco? Of course you wouldn't have any extra tobacco.
For many Native American cultures, however, tobacco is a sacrament. So every time Nobody asks for tobacco, which he means as, please pray with me, Blake, already used to the question, can only hear it as, yo, can I bum a smoke?
That tobacco is for your wage. William Blake.
Nobody. I don't smoke.
Stupid fucking white man, indeed.
his own life story is arguably more fleshed out than Blake's. Nobody, as you might guess from the name, is a loner. He's a victim of prejudice, not only from whites, but from natives. He was born of mixed tribes, Blood and Blackfoot, and so he was shunned from both. Captured as a boy by white soldiers and paraded around Toronto, New York, and London, he learned the English culture and ran back to his tribe, and there he was shunned because of his alien ways. Then they gave him a new name.
They called me a liar. Exhibit. He who talks loud, saying nothing.
It gives a decent explanation for why he would be wandering alone with a white dude, and away from his tribe. But there's a sense of tragedy here. In accepting white society, he becomes a pariah. This Tonto is a traitor.
But the most fascinating thing about He Who Talks Loud Saying Nothing is not his nativeness. It's his whiteness.
Probably the biggest irony of the film is just why he helps Johnny Depp. It's not because he just exists to serve Whitey. It's because he's a fan.
What name were you given at birth, stupid white man?
Blake. William Blake.
Is this a lie? Or a white man's trick?
No. I'm William Blake.
Then you are a dead man.
In his backstory, nobody studied the poetry of William Blake while in England, and, making a simple mistake, he thought that Johnny Depp was the poet.
Every morn and every night, some are born to sweet delight. Some are born to sweet delight. Some are born to endless night.
In fact, a lot of his little sound bites of indigenous wisdom are really just lines of Blake that only sound like stereotypical Pathfinder speak.
The eagle never lost so much time as when he submitted to learn from the crow.
Sure, some of it's authentic native writing, like this speech quoted from the Lakota holy man Brave Buffalo.
Things which are alike in nature grow to look alike. And the speaking stones have lain a long time looking at the sun.
But there's plenty of Blake in there too.
Vision of Christ that thou dost see is my vision's greatest enemy.
The irony is twofold. First, in a society that considers him a savage,
perhaps I could interest you in some beads. Or possibly a blanket.
He's the only one who knows enough about white culture to make the connection between William Blake and the poet. Not even William Blake is cultured enough to know who the guy is.
It's so strange that you don't remember any of your poetry.
I don't know anything about poetry.
Oh, you're so modest.
And secondly, nobody's taking on the role of the stereotypical Indian sage spouting various nuggets of wisdom. White guys in these kinds of stories always look to the native for advice, and here, it's the white guy's own culture spouted back at him, as if he was supposed to know all along. It's a sly acknowledgement of Native American subjugation and cultural assimilation, weaved into the fabric of a stereotype that white America created.
Stupid fucking white man.
I mean, hell, even the name He Who Talks Loud Saying Nothing sounds like authentic frontier gibberish, but it's not. It's a James Brown song.
Just talking loud and saying nothing. Just saying nothing.
Nobody is a fascinating subversion of Tonto. He's not a white man's fantasy of a native with a clownish demeanor and a bad grasp of English.
Here, gun to kill bad men.
But a human being, flawed and wizened, laughing at his status as he copes with his mental colonization.
Now, I'm not calling this movie the most authentic voice of the Native American on screen, but it's still made by a white guy and about a white guy for white guys. It's not, say, Smoke Signals.
It was made a few years after Dead Man, and it also had Gary Farmer. And unlike Dead Man, it had Native American leads and a Native American director about Native Americans. And most importantly, it was about Native life now. Not a century or two ago when they still rode horses and killed Custer's dumbass and whatever.
You gotta look like a warrior. You gotta look like you just came back from killing a buffalo.
But our tribe never hunted buffalo, we were fishermen.
I've seen it, and it's funny, heartfelt, if a bit on the nose at times.
Those are our seats?
You mean these were your seats?
No, that's not what he means.
Now listen up. These are our seats now, and there ain't a damn thing you can do about it.
Get it?
In fact, both of these movies were riding a wave of interest in the cinematic Indian, all because some doofus in a mullet went and made a big, long Avatar ripoff.
The people of my generation grew up riding that wave. Dancing with wolves, staying alive no matter what occurs, hearing the wolf cry to the blue corn moon, and a decade later...
We have learned mystical diddly squat.
But that wave did allow for a mini indie boom where Native Americans could start expressing themselves with their own voices. Dead Man was part of that boom, and it helped bring a little-heard voice to our ears. And probably more importantly, it let Native audiences know that they still had some sort of representation in this loud screaming match known as the modern media landscape. Native Americans on screen have a long history of being caricatures. They could only know themselves through the eyes of white men. And because of that long history, the self-portrait becomes all the more valuable. Native actors playing native roles have long tried to observe a perspective that has been denied them. I highly recommend the documentary Real Injun for a more in-depth history of the relationship between Hollywood and Native Americans.
And as for Dead Man, there are better representations, and there are worse. There are far, far worse.
Hail to the Redskin! Hail victory!
But this movie shows there's a smarter, more respectful way. Even more impressive knowing that it's a white director calling the shots. It's certainly one of the better depictions of Native culture on film. And even if that aspect wasn't there, Dead Man is poetic, funny, haunting, and metaphysically touching. A meditation worth experiencing, cinematic poetry worth reading, and a journey worth taking, over and over.
That's the Lone Ranger. Can't judge it till I see it. Ready, Ben?
Ready.
Okay.
Hi-ho, Silver. Stupid fucking white man.
Like the Seminole, Navajo, Kickapoo, like those Indians, I'm an Indian too. I sue, ooh, ooh, I sue, ooh, ooh. Just like rising moon, falling pants, running nose, like those Indians, I'm an Indian too.
Yeah! There's a snake in my boot.